Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst at Google in Switzerland, and I try to connect webmasters, publishers like you all with our engineers and make sure that information is flowing in both directions. So we have a bunch of questions that were already submitted, but if any one of you who's in the Hangout now wants to go ahead and jump in and ask a first question or two, go ahead.
I have a question about 301.
All right.
So we all know everything about 301s and so on, but I just really wanted to ask you, I made a really big change to this page, and so I 301 did everything correctly in the entire site. Okay, so all the URLs, everything's fixed. So now I fetched Googlebot, and it took over 2 weeks. So the URL is finally showing up, but how long would it take for all the juice to pass from the old page to the new one? And I know you've touched on that a lot, many times, and I just wanted you to clarify that if it's possible.
So that's just one page or a whole site?
Yeah, just just a specific page. There's a lot of alteration done to the exact, to the page, and it's again not for the search engine, but for the user only.
Mm-hmm.
You guys wanted so.
Yeah, so I guess that's something where at least we'd have to crawl it a few times to kind of at least notice that it changed. And after that, some of our algorithms are faster and some of them a little bit slower on picking up those changes. So I imagine for the most part you'd see those changes within a couple of days of us recrawling those pages.
Okay, because I see certain queries show up. It's still showing up. The old page is still showing up, and then the new page is showing up for different queries. Why is that?
I think that's probably just the way the algorithms are picking up on some of the old things and some of the new things. So that's kind of something where users will make it to the final page anyway, so that'll still be around. So I wouldn't really worry too much about that. I mean, some of these things get picked up a little bit faster. Some of them take a little bit longer. It's not that it's all just like one crawl and then suddenly everything's over on the new URL.
And is it normal for it to go down in rankings and then go back to itself, or I mean?
Usually for individual pages, you wouldn't see big ranking changes just if you're redirecting. If you're significantly changing the content of those pages, then of course you'll see some fluctuations. Some of the things we'll be able to pick up on a little bit faster. Other things, they kind of take a while to understand the new page that you're essentially showing us. So if it has different links, if the rest of the site has changed as well, all of these things kind of come together, and sometimes it takes a while for us to settle back down with the previous state.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
Sure.
Hey, John, a quick question about rel canonical.
Okay.
Let's assume we have an e-commerce website where products have different variation based on color, for example. So let's take an eyeglasses store, and the frames themselves have different colors, and there's a product URL for each of these colors. Let's say there are 3 or 4 variation per product. Would it be wise to do a rel canonical, given that most of the products aren't really different except that color? And would it be wise to do a rel canonical to a single product, or would that be overkill and Google would decide what URL to give to the users based on their search query?
So what would happen with a rel canonical is that we would essentially drop or ignore those other variations. So if you set the rel canonical of your red page to the blue page, then we won't really be able to rank that page for queries around red sunglasses, for example. So that's something where if you're taking related but slightly unique pages and rel canonicalizing them to one specific page, then we'll kind of lose that information that makes that page unique. So sometimes that might not matter. Maybe you have one page that's like for this pair of sunglasses in all variations, and that's your main page for this specific model of sunglasses. Maybe that's fine. Maybe it lists the different colors. that could be a perfect reason to kind of set that up like that. But on the other hand, if you have just one color and you have different colors that are actually kind of unique at the same level, then that's something where I probably wouldn't use a rel canonical, because those pages are unique by themselves. It makes sense for us to send people who are looking for red sunglasses of that model to that specific red page and not to the blue page.
Right, so basically I should think about what the users are actually looking for. If they aren't really interested in searching for actual color variation, then do a rel canonical. But if they are, then the fact that all these variations have the same product description and price, for example, doesn't really affect the website from a negative point of view, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's something where you have to figure out: do you want these pages to rank separately? Is there something unique on these pages that makes sense to show them in the search results like that? Or are these things that you can fold together and say, this is actually my main page, and this is the one I want ranking with the content that's currently on it?
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Sure. All right, let's
Page
grab it.
about site links, if you get a second.
Go ahead.
When the website is displaying site links, is that any indicator of authority or trust?
Not directly. So I imagine to some extent we want to show them for pages where we know it makes sense. So you could say that something like trust is kind of flowing into that. But primarily, we're able to understand the structure of the site. We're able to understand that if someone is searching for this specific brand or this specific item, that maybe they go to different pages as well in the search results. So we'll kind of bubble that up that way in the search results. So it's something where we probably wouldn't show it for any random website, but past that, it's not a sign that you've passed some kind of a magical threshold, and now your website is good enough to be shown with site links. It's primarily something where we understand the site structure and know that these other pages make sense for the user as well, so we'll show them as site links.
Thanks.
All right. We have a question here. If a lot of users are bouncing back to Google from a website using the back button, is that a strong indicator of the quality of that URL for a search term? Why would Google not use that as a metric to rank a page? This is, I guess, a tricky question because to a big extent, there are lots of reasons why people go back and forth in the search results, and it's not something where we could say on a per-page level, this is an indicator of this being a high-quality page or a low-quality page. Sometimes pages have content on them that users can read within a couple of seconds, and they go back and do something else. And that's perfectly fine. That's not a sign that it's a bad page. Contrary, the user was able to get the information they wanted really quickly, and they're happy with that. We do use some kind of looking at like which results people are clicking on when we evaluate our algorithms overall, though. So if we're looking at specific algorithm changes and we say, well, people are clicking on lower search results in general across this algorithm, across millions of queries that were made, then maybe that's a sign that the algorithm isn't doing what it should be doing, that it's kind of encouraging people to not find the results that they're actually looking for in the first couple of places. So on a very broad level, it makes sense to use that information. On a very page level, focused basis, it's a very noisy signal that I think probably wouldn't make that much sense to keep and to kind of track for ranking. It's also something that's very easily gameable, so I don't think it's something where we would say this is useful signal by itself. But across millions of queries on an algorithm basis, that's probably something that kind of settles down and gives some kind of useful information.
John, can I ask, how important is structured data through the Webmaster Tools?
For ranking, we don't use structured data. So that's something where we use this primarily for rich snippets. If we can pull out more information about your pages and we can bubble that up as rich snippet, that's a great thing to do. That gives the user a little bit more information about the page and kind of tells them that this is the page they're looking for. So from that point of view, from a kind of a click-through rate point of view, that's something that I think definitely makes sense. We don't use it for ranking, though. So if you have things marked up on your page, we might be able to understand the page a little bit better. But it's not that we'd be able to say, well, this has structured data, this doesn't have structured data, therefore this must be a better page. This is something that's kind of technical element on the page. And from that point of view, I'd be cautious to say this is an indicator of a high-quality site, because a lot of times we'll see spammers create technically really high-quality sites because they have a lot of experience creating lots and lots of sites. So their sites will be technically perfect, and maybe they'll scrape content from other sites, they'll mark up the structured data, but just because it's a technically well-made website and uses structured data doesn't mean that it's necessarily a better website.
These spammers. Ugh.
Well, I mean, it's just one example. It's something that that comes up every now and then, where a mom and pop website will kind of have this messy front page website that, from a technical point of view, you'd look at it and say, "Oh gosh, how can this even show up in a browser?" But from a practical point of view, from a search quality side, it's something that we do want to show in the search results, even if it's kind of messy code, if it's messy HTML. If it's an exported Word page or something like that, then that doesn't necessarily make it a lower quality search result. All right, you mentioned that Google can pick up on signals of people recommending your website to other people very directly. Can you elaborate on what these signals might be? Social shares, bookmarks, etc. I'm not really sure what specifically you're pointing at that I might have said there, but I think one thing to keep in mind is we don't use social signals for search. So things like likes or plus ones, those kind of things, aren't necessarily something that we'd be able to use for search, because for the most part we don't have that information. So that's something that we can't really use if we don't really have it. So from that point of view, those kind of social signals kind of get lost. Anything else that essentially looks like a web page that we can crawl, that has links on it, that's something we can treat as a web page and we can kind of pick up and reuse.
John, with the exception of personalized search.
Personalized search is, I guess, something different, because that's personalized. Like you said, that's something where we do take into account like who your specific friends are, or your circles, or however that kind of ties in. But that only works for the information that we do have. So, and that's specific to individual users. So that's not something where if you have a lot of friends that are posting content, that doesn't mean that that content will be relevant to people who aren't your friends, who aren't kind of in your circles, or who have you in their circles.
Right. Thanks.
All right, XML sitemaps. If the taxonomy overall site structure is good, is there any need for XML sitemaps? I've seen a lot of examples of large sites without XML sitemap files doing great for crawling and indexing, etc. You absolutely don't need XML sitemaps. So it's not a requirement. It's not that your website will disappear from Google search if you don't have one. The XML sitemaps help us a lot with quickly changing content, so content that changes, content that gets added to your pages, because we don't have to crawl your website to realize that these pages are new and have been updated. So if you have a blog, if you have a news website, if you have a shop that has maybe Christmas specials, those kind of things, where you want new and updated content picked up as quickly as possible, then that sitemap is going to help us to get there as fast as possible. On the other hand, if you have content you put up once, you keep it like that for 10 years, and you're not going to change it in the next 10 years, then it doesn't really matter if you have a sitemap or not. We have that content already. We don't need to kind of recrawl it every 5 minutes. We'll be able to kind of figure out what cycle makes sense for us there. And if you happen to change something there, it won't be picked up immediately, but it'll be picked up sooner or later.
Hey, John, real quick question about something we noticed in Webmaster Tools recently. We were looking through the content keywords, and noticed that for some reason the word logo had come up very high in the list there, and we discovered that in a lot of our alt text around the site where we had logos of things, we would call it whatever logo. And we were just wondering, is that something we should be concerned about, the fact that we went and redid the alt text to take them out, but in general, should we be concerned about seeing something like that?
No. So the content keywords feature looks at the content that we see when we crawl the pages, and we'll pick up on things like logo, or if we happen to crawl and index your robots text file or your sitemap and kind of treat it as a normal HTML page, then we'll pick up things like HTTP or www or whatever might be in there. So it's basically just a signal that we found this text while we crawled your pages. It doesn't mean that it's relevant for your website. It doesn't mean that it's relevant for ranking. It's not that your website is going to rank for the term logo or anything like that. It's just we found this text. We thought we'd let you know about that, so you're kind of aware of that. The main reason I'd use that feature is to make sure that there's not something completely irrelevant that kind of pops up. So if your site is about cars and suddenly you see things about casinos in there, then chances are someone has been spamming your site or hacked your site or something like that. So that's a really good sign that something really weird is happening with your website, and that's worth kind of digging into and figuring out what happened there. But if this is based on something that you have on your pages, like the alt text for your logo, or when we crawl a sitemap or a robots text file, whatever, it happens. It's not going to change anything for ranking. It's not going to change anything for the rest of the words that were found on your site. It's just, we found this on your site. We thought we'd kind of let you know about that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Webmaster Tools and HTTPS. What's the difference between HTTP and HTTPS in Webmaster Tools verified properties? So for some of the features in Webmaster Tools, we differentiate between HTTP and HTTPS versions, and we'll show you the data separately. So specifically, I think this is around index status, this is around search queries feature, where if you're moving from one variation to the other, you'll see the one variation kind of go down, the other one kind of go up again. And we primarily do that separately so that you can look at these versions separately and figure out if anything weird is happening with your transition, if everything is being picked up properly, if the search queries are picking up over time again, those kind of things. So it's also, as with everything else in Webmaster Tools, this doesn't affect your rankings if you have those variations verified or not. But if you're doing a move from one version to the other, I definitely make sure that you have both of them in Webmaster Tools so that you can kind of double check that technically things are working the way they should be working. Another sitemaps question. Are there any advantages in splitting up the XML sitemap into smaller files, like 5,000 or 10,000 items per file? You can definitely do that if you want to. What will probably happen there is we'll have to recrawl more sitemap files to pick up the changes. Usually that's not a big load on your server. These are just text files if you're not generating them dynamically. The advantage I see there with smaller sitemap files is specifically when you're looking at the indexing of those URLs, it's a lot easier to kind of pinpoint individual issues. So if you split your sitemap file in a logical structure like category pages, articles, blog posts, products, something like that, you'll be able to look at the indexing status of each individual sitemap file and see, oh, for this type of page, most of my pages are being indexed. For this other type of page, maybe half of my pages are being indexed. And by knowing which type of page is indexed how well, you can figure out, is this a critical problem or is this essentially fine? So if we're able to pick up, let's say, half of your product pages, but we can pick up all of your category pages, then probably your site will still rank normally, and things will work well in search anyway. On the other hand, if we're not able to crawl any of your articles or any of your category pages, and your product pages are being picked up, then that's a sign that maybe something technically is wrong with the way your category pages are set up or the way they're maybe linked internally, something like that. So by splitting it up, it's usually a little bit easier to diagnose problems. If you don't have any problems at all with your sitemap files, then it doesn't really give you any advantage in splitting them up or keeping them big.
Hey, John, if I can jump in real quick with a question about not Penguin per se, but disavowing in general.
Okay.
There's been a lot of talk about how great it would be if Google could offer some sort of notification on when we download the latest links in Webmaster Tools to kind of identify which ones have already been disavowed when we update the file. Is there any possibility of that coming out in the future? It would make our jobs as webmasters so much easier.
So if you would see within the download which ones are kind of blocked by your disavow file already.
Exactly.
I don't see that happening anytime soon, but it's an interesting idea. I think it's also something that probably someone could make a simple tool for, because taking a disavow file and comparing it to a links download shouldn't be that complicated.
Sort of like matching a one-to-one.
Yeah, because I mean, your domains are things that are easy to match. The individual URLs are easy to match. It shouldn't be that complicated. So if someone is looking for a Christmas project, that might be something to try out.
I'm going to hire Barry.
I don't know. Maybe if I have time in between, I'll put together a simple script to kind of do that for you. But I don't see that happening in Webmaster Tools anytime soon. They're working on a variety of features, and at the moment the links feature isn't something they're spending too much time on, so I don't see them kind of jumping in and tweaking that just for that feature.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Barry.
Are you sure? Okay, all right, two questions. Two questions, one's fast, one's kind of longer. So you said, John, in the past that obviously hidden or tabbed content may not be fully indexed or ranked in some sense. I'm not going to go through all the details, but there was an argument on Friday's Hangout between the webmasters, because you said also that for many mobile ranking factors, you just look at the desktop version. So when you change the CSS style sheets to hide some navigation or content to make it more mobile friendly on a responsive design, are you looking at that on the mobile side for hidden content, or you're still looking at the desktop version of the hidden content? Does that make sense?
We're looking at the desktop version. That's the canonical version. So if you have the connection between the two pages, if they're separate pages, then we'd be looking at the desktop version, and that's the one we'd be using for indexing. So if it's visible on the desktop version and you're kind of folding it away, simplifying it on the mobile version, then that's absolutely fine. If we run across situations where we see that people are abusing this, that they're kind of, I don't know, showing cartoons on the desktop site and showing adult content on the mobile site, then that's something where we might have to kind of reconsider that and see what we'd have to do there. But for the most part, I don't see that making sense, that you'd kind of show something significantly different on the mobile site than on the desktop site, because then on the mobile site, people would be kind of lost, like what should they be doing there?
Cool, thank you. And a very quick question, blink twice if it's true, once if it's not true. Did you make an offer to Dwayne Forrest to work at Google?
I think he's working at Bing now.
I know, I just wanted to know between that time.
What do you mean?
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
No, I got lost. Okay.
I'm just joking.
Oh, so if we made an offer for Dwayne, I don't know. I didn't make anything. So it sounds like he got a lot of different offers, but he's a good guy. I'm sure he'll find something really interesting at Bing to do there. So.
All right, thanks.
John, going further on Greg's questions regarding Webmaster Tool features, if I can add a few suggestions that I've noticed recently that would help me manage my websites better with Webmaster Tools. Is it possible to add a filter or something like that so I can select both web and mobile for example, when I'm looking at search queries, I want to see search queries for both web and mobile. So for search and exclude images, for example. Because right now you can just search, you can just see search queries for web or for mobile, but not both at the same time. Sure, you can see all, but that would include also images and everything else that is there. And if it's also possible to maybe add a local filter, so we can see queries that show local results. Maybe that's possible.
Okay, let me just jot this down.
Maybe if I can, instead of just having a drop down where I can select web or mobile or images, maybe just checkboxes, so I can select multiple, web and mobile, but not images. Also, do you know if there's going to be any better integration with Google Analytics? There hasn't been any changes to that.
I can definitely pass the search query things along because I know they're working on some fun stuff there. I don't know how far they are with regards to how much your feedback will still be able to make it in there, but I'm happy to pass that along. With regards to analytics, I'm not aware of anything specific happening there. I know they still kind of have the bucketed numbers in analytics, so that's something that's definitely still open. I imagine that will get fixed at some point, but I don't really know what the analytics side of things is planning.
Okay, and is it possible that we SEOs would have like something along the like the MCC account that PPC managers have, where they have multiple clients in the same account, and they can just ask a website for permission to handle their, because when we're getting new clients who aren't really tech savvy, they kind of don't understand how to give access and add users and even create their Webmaster Tools account. So that's a lot of time wasted at the beginning. Maybe there's gonna be a better integration like the PPC people have with the client center.
But
I don't know how that actually works on the AdWords side, but in Webmaster Tools you can already delegate access.
yeah.
Maybe it's just too complicated from what I hear from you.
Delegate access, you mean just add another user, or?
Yeah. You can add like a read-only user if you wanted to kind of let them look at Webmaster Tools without making changes.
Yeah, well, in the client center for PPC, you actually have an option to actually request an access to a certain website without actually telling that person, could you go ahead and click that button and add this email and so forth. So actually just request an invitation, and the user receives an email or in the account a notification, and he just accepts or denies it.
Yeah, it's basically like the same kind of system as the MyCC account, So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still clients basically I tell them where to go, and I mean they add me. I mean, and they're you become an administrator or a read-only access, like you were saying. So yeah, I mean, but so what do you think? Is I just making it the same, like an easier way, like with the MCC,
I have no idea how that works with AdWords, so I will take your word for it that it's a lot easier. I'm not sure if requesting access would be that much of a good idea because it obviously spams the owner, but maybe there's a way to do that in a reasonable way. So I'll definitely take that up with the team that handles the verification. Sounds like an interesting idea.
But I mean, it's fine the way it is now. Like
John,
it's very secure.
Could we see some grouping of the different domain types, or is that in the works by any chance?
I know that's a commonly asked question, so I'm sure they're kind of aware of this issue, but I don't know of any plans of that like changing immediately. So I imagine some point that'll kind of work out in a way that we can kind of have these accounts, these sites a little bit more grouped. But it's not something that's like coming out today or tomorrow.
John, I
I
know you
think
were.
another popular one would be to show. I mean, I don't know the if it's going to be too much extra data, but to show 6 months or so instead of 3 months. You know, the default 3 months that we've got now is difficult to work with. Some people save that data, but as webmasters, when we come along to work on someone's site, they have not saved any of that data, so all we've got to look at is the 3 months.
Yeah.
John,
That's something I've heard before as well, yeah. I know some of these things seem easy to do, but sometimes they're a bit harder than they initially look. So I know with the data, that's something that we've brought up with the team as well, and they're aware of this. But there are a lot of sites out there and are tracking a lot of data, so it's a lot of stuff they'd have to kind of duplicate or triplicate depending on how far back you'd want that data.
John, last Hangout you touched on mobile usability, and I said if there's just a small option, can you still pass feedback or no?
What do you mean?
Okay, so for mobile usability, like when it scans the pages, right? So after it's, you look at it and you fixed it, along with a developer or with, a team of 20 people, because in, big Fortune 1000s, it's not that easy. And you've done that. You don't have to come back to the same problem again. You just mark it as fixed, just as with crawl errors. Is it hard for them to do that? Like, once you're done, you fix the problem, you check the page insights, or because it takes you there anyways, and then you corrected the problem. It's 100 out of 100, and you're dealing with like 5,000 pages. You come back to mobile usability again, and it's all the errors are there again, and you're kind of confused, or I'm just saying it's just an easier for.
I don't know if marking as fixed would be the best solution there, but for example, another idea might be just to say we can recognize that you fixed some of your pages. We can see that it's all the same template. We'll just kind of recrawl all of the similar pages and reprocess them to make sure that they're like okay now. So instead of kind of like requiring that you mark them individually as fixed, maybe we could just figure that out ourselves. But that definitely sounds like something that would make it a little bit easier and a little bit clearer for you to also show what work you've done there on that site, instead of like saying, okay, we'll just wait 6 months until everything's recrawled and then we'll see a drop in the numbers. If you can see that change a little bit faster, then that's probably useful.
It'll make a big difference, yes. Thank you so much.
All right, let me go through some of the questions that were submitted here, and then we'll get back to feature requests for Webmaster Tools. Webmaster Tools. Back to Webmaster Tools. How accurate is the index count in Webmaster Tools? What about the Webmaster Tools count versus a site count? So I definitely wouldn't use a site query for any kind of diagnostics purposes. I generally just use that to see if individual pages are indexed or not indexed. Webmaster Tools count is pretty accurate. It's based on the current index data that we have, but it's sometimes based on everything that we've kind of crawled and indexed for your site. So instead of looking at the aggregated number for your whole website of all pages that are indexed, I'd recommend using the sitemap file and submitting a sitemap file, then looking at the index count for that sitemap file, because then you'll know based on the URLs that you submitted, the ones that you actually want to have indexed, how many of those got indexed, and not how many random pages that we find on your website and index. So both the sitemaps count and the Webmaster Tools index status count are pretty accurate numbers. They should be updated fairly frequently. The sitemaps count, I think, gets updated daily. So that's something that gives you very actionable feedback on what we have indexed. Another sitemaps question. You mentioned last year in a Hangout that XML sitemap files for pages that are set to 404 or 410 in order to speed up the process is not the best approach. However, I've seen very good results with it. Yes, I guess you can do this in the sense that if you update the last modification date, submit the URL with the sitemap, we'll recrawl that, we'll notice it's a 404, and we'll drop it out of the index a little bit faster. What I wouldn't do is keep them in there persistently. So if you've made a big change on your website and you need to kind of drop these pages fairly quickly, then submitting them in a sitemap like that makes sense. But keeping them there for the long run, where you know that within your sitemap file, half of the URLs don't exist anymore, that just makes it very much harder for you to diagnose any real issues, because the index count for that sitemap file will be completely weird, because on the one hand, you submit URLs that you know don't exist, and on the other hand, you submit some that you do want to have indexed. And that makes it really hard for you to kind of take action on that number. But if you do this as a one-time thing, and you say, I'm submitting them now, Google should recrawl all these pages and recognize that they're gone, fine. That seems like something you can do.
John, I have to ask, we have more than 160,000 pages removed from Google, and we can remove, I think, about 2,000 links at this point per day. So does that affect the ranking because of big number? It will take like 6 months for us to go to 0 errors.
So what kind of pages are you removing?
We have websites similar to the YouTube. So we removed all the thin content. We removed the duplicated content, canonical content. We removed more than 150,000 users from the website that they were link building to their pages. So we removed everything. So we have about 160,000 errors at this point. So.
Okay, and these are pages that return 404, something like that now?
Yeah, everything is on 404.
Yeah, that's fine. I would just let them be recrawled and re-indexed like that naturally. So I wouldn't use the URL removal tool for that manually, and that's fine. It's not that it would cause any problems for us if we see a lot of 404 errors. It's actually a sign that your site is working technically correct, because if we see 404 errors, then we kind of know we can drop that out. Whereas if you try to hide the 404 errors with redirects or by serving a 200 result code to make the error count look lower, that's something that actually causes more problems for us. So 404s are perfectly fine, and that's a perfect use case for letting those pages drop out naturally.
Yeah, Sorry, it's not a problem for dropping them. We wanted to remove all the bad content. It's just that in the Google Webmaster Tools, we went from 50,000 visits from the Google search. We are hitting like 150 visits per day at this point. So it's been like 3 years now going down, and we have removed about 3 months ago. Everything is cleaned up, and it's just waiting. When will it happen? I think we got hit by the penguin, some kind of penguin. But is there a chance to repair that domain in the following months? I know it's algorithm and everything, but
it's really hard to say without looking at the site. But if this is something that has been happening over the course of multiple years, then that sounds like we've kind of picked up on this issue step by step and said, okay, the site overall is kind of lower quality, and it sounds like we almost have to reevaluate those general decisions that our algorithms have made. And if you've removed a lot of really low quality content, then that's something that I think our algorithms will pick up on over time, but it's not something where you'd see a change from one day to the next or even from 1 month to the next. So I imagine this is something that will take a couple of months to kind of settle down again. And if your page was ranking so well a couple of years ago, a lot of things have changed on the web, a lot of things have changed in our algorithms. I wouldn't expect that it will automatically pop back up to the old state. It might pop up to a newer state that's higher, it might pop up to a newer state that's lower than before. So things have changed on the web over those couple of years. I think if you significantly clean up the lower quality content, make sure it kind of stays out of your site, maybe revamp your site to really look fantastic and have fantastic content, then those are good prerequisites to kind of showing up more visibly in search. But it takes a lot of time for things like that to kind of settle down and pop back up.
Hey, John, if there's pages that the algorithm doesn't index, even though everything seems right with them and they're in the sitemaps, is that an indication that the algorithm feels that that page is of low quality?
Sometimes, yeah. It's really hard to say without looking at the pages, because most of the time this is more of a technical issue, where we say we crawl this page, we found a no index, or we crawl this page and it looks like it's redirecting us to a different page by JavaScript. Maybe that's something users see, maybe they don't see that, but it's usually more of a technical issue. It's fairly rare that we would look at a page and say, well, this whole website looks okay, but this page is so low quality, we're going to skip on it. So that's kind of a rare situation. It can happen that our algorithms look at those pages. Usually they'd look at the whole site and say, well, this whole site is kind of low quality. It doesn't make sense to spend too much energy on crawling and indexing everything from this site. So that's usually the level where the quality algorithms come in with indexing. Most of the time, if the site is being crawled normally and indexed normally otherwise, then it's more a matter that there's something technically weird with that individual page that it wouldn't get indexed.
Okay, thanks.
John, if I can jump in one last time with a question about subdomains.
Sure.
Regarding subdomains, if you have a blog that's hosted on a subdomain, blog.website.com versus website.com/blog, having it in the root domain, when you're doing outreach and acquiring links back to the blog, wouldn't it make more sense to have the blog hosted as part of the root domain instead?
From a search point of view, it doesn't really matter that much. That's something, sometimes for technical reasons, sometimes for marketing reasons, you put it in a subdomain or a subdirectory. That's essentially up to you. That's not something where we'd say from a search point of view it makes any big difference. The other thing from your question that sounds more tricky is you're going out and doing outreach for link building, which sounds like you might be doing something sneaky with regards to your links, but that's independent of where you have those pages located. So that's more the thing I'd be kind of cautious about, or make sure you're handling that in a way that you're not, I don't know, buying links or trading links, those kind of things. I don't know. You're shaking your head, so that sounds like that's not something you're doing.
Correct.
Okay. But from a technical point of view, like subdomain or subdirectory is essentially up to you. What I would shy away from is using wildcard subdomains, so you have like keyword.yourwebsite.com, because that makes it a lot harder for us to actually crawl your pages properly. But if you just have blog and www, fine. That's no problem.
John, just very quick, just on the home page, okay? I don't remember from all the Hangouts that I've been that we've ever touched on that. What would you recommend? So, a brand, not a brand, family, locally owned business. How much content should be on the home page?
At least 250 words or 700 characters.
Okay, because I see a lot of brands that don't have.
Sorry, I just made that up. No, I mean it really depends on what you want to put on your homepage.
No, I know, because a lot of professionals recommend 750 and up, and make big blogs and things about it, and so on, and talk about about this forever. So I just thought
it's not the case that we go out and count those words and like our algorithms have a threshold and say this is a good page because it has more words on it or fewer words on it. We try to find out what's relevant for these pages, and a lot of times that's in the text. So having enough text in there to kind of help us recognize those pages, what they're about, what's actually relevant on those pages, that's an important aspect there, but it's not that you need a specific word count for that or anything like that.
Okay. I just there's many blogs out there that touch and say 750, 1,000 will help you, and Word count,
Yeah.
you know.
I really wouldn't worry about the word count there. I'd really look at the pages and look at the text and see if it's actually relevant, if it's something that you can pick up on, where you can kind of use that information. And also make sure that you're looking at the actual text and not looking at things like the images. What I still see a lot of times is people will kind of format text in a fancy way and keep that as an image on their page. And then suddenly the logo with like the subheading, the tagline, all of that is in an image. And if we don't see that at all in text form, then that makes it really hard for us to see that this is actually relevant for this page. We're getting better and better at understanding pages, but kind of extracting text from images and saying this is a part of the page is still a pretty hard problem.
And brands that don't have text at all on their homepage, you recommend that they do have text, right? I mean, I see still a lot of, brands that don't have text, and the person that owns the site tells me that, hey, we don't want text because we like the style, and so we don't care about the text.
Yeah, it's always tricky because some of these sites are really, really nice. They have really minimalistic design, and it kind of matches their marketing, their kind of the general corporate identity of the site, of the business. And sometimes it just looks really nice. But if we don't have a lot of text on these pages, it's really hard for us to pick up which pages are relevant, which pages we should be showing in search. So things like brand queries, if someone is searching for the company name, we'll still usually be able to pick that up and say, well, this website belongs to this company, we'll show it in search. But if they're looking for specific products and we actually never are able to find that text on those pages, then that's going to be really tricky and kind of hit and miss for us to actually be able to use that.
Thank you for touching on that. Thanks.
Sure.
Doing a small follow-up on that question, we're working with a very big automotive website, and as an automotive website, they have a lot of photos. They usually do car news and car reviews, and they have like hundreds of thousands of articles for that. And for each article, there's a gallery page, and of course, for each photo, there's a separate URL from that gallery. The idea is that each photo URL only has the actual photo and links to all the other photos and back to the picture gallery. We did a rel canonical back to the picture gallery from the picture URL because we thought it's too little content and too similar from all the other pages. But of course, we sacrificed the image traffic that was. We are no longer indexed. The images are no longer indexed. And is that something that we should remove? Is it okay for us to have a lot of image URLs with pages that only feature that image?
That's fine. I think that's a decision you can make, and I know some sites don't want their big images indexed in image search, and that's their decision to do. It's not something where we'd say this website is lower quality because they're blocking the images from being indexed. That's essentially up to you. So if that makes sense for you to kind of get this kind of traffic, fine. If you want to kind of concentrate things on your other pages, that's fine too. One thing you could do is maybe treat like a sample of these pages differently and see which one actually works better for your site. And you'll quickly see, does it make sense to do this change, or does it not make sense to do this change? And that's something that should only be affecting those specific types of pages. So that's something you can fairly quickly kind of test to see, are users really picking up on this? Do they want to go to these individual photo pages, or are they happy with the other kind of content on the rest of your site?
But would it be a problem to us? Let's say we remove the rel canonical, and we have, like, as I said, a few 100,000 articles. But if we remove the rel canonical, we'll have like a couple of million photo URLs suddenly added to the index. Again, pages with the photo and links to the other photos and back to the picture gallery and the article. Would that be a problem would Google consider it less of a quality
That shouldn't be a problem. That's something where I think this is unique content, it's relevant content. If someone is searching for that image, then that's the type of thing that might be fine. I think you probably want to just watch out for your server capacity to make sure that your server is able to handle this load. If Googlebot were suddenly able to crawl like 100 times the number of URLs, is that something that would cause problems for your site? And if so, maybe it makes sense to kind of hold that back a little bit. But if your server can handle that load without any problems, or if you can ramp this up step by step, that's something to try out. I don't see any problems with that.
Oh, okay, thanks.
John, I have to follow up on that last response you had. I'm dying on the inside slowly. I just want to clarify. Outreach and content marketing is not against Google's guidelines, correct? We're not buying anything or doing anything of that sort.
As long as you're not going out and kind of creating artificial links on other sites, I don't see a big problem with that. If you're drawing attention to your business, drawing attention to your website, that's generally fine. If you're going out to hundreds of directories and saying, hey, please put a link to my site on your site, then that's something I kind of shy away from, because I know that's something our algorithms would pick up on as kind of a web spammy type thing, and maybe the manual web spam team would also look at that and say, well, it looks like this guy is just dropping his link everywhere. Maybe we should be more cautious with the links to his site. But
My team and I only do editorial-based links through contacting different websites and bloggers, not spammy stuff.
yeah, I don't know what kind of links you're doing, so I can't say everything you're doing is perfect, but it sounds like you're doing the right thing there. It sounds like you're kind of drawing attention to your business, to your website, and if people like what they see and they link to it, fine.
Thank you, sir.
All right. If a website main menu relies on some links made with JavaScript, do those JavaScript links carry PageRank on their target URLs? Yes, they do. So we're getting better and better at understanding JavaScript, and if we can crawl and process your site's JavaScript, and it's kind of like a menu for your website, then we'll be able to pick up those links and treat them like normal links. So if you want to have them treated as no-follow links, I just make sure that your JavaScript generates the no-follow attribute as well, and then we can pick that up and use that appropriately. But if this is a normal menu for within your website, then in general, we should be able to pick that up and crawl your website based on that like any other type of menu.
John, can I shortly follow up on this?
Sure.
What if those links are hidden because, well, with JavaScript, when you mouse hover over it, it will pop up and then it will go back. What about this? Is this a problem from Google's point of view?
That's fine. I mean, that's similar to other type of menus. If you use CSS, if you use JavaScript, I think with HTML5 you can do something similar where on hover it kind of displays things, otherwise it hides them. That's fine. I mean, a lot of websites have that kind of navigation.
Okay, thank you.
John, can I ask a question?
Oh, just a question. Let me just go through this one, and I'll get you right after that. In Webmaster Tools, we're getting server errors since 9th of October. No response failure rate is about 5% out of 200,000 requests per day. Server is not overloaded, no maintenance, no firewall problems, no 50 times errors in logs. Fetches Google works fine. What could be the problem? I probably have to take a look at that site specifically. So if you can post in the forum and maybe drop a link from the Hangout event page, I can take a quick look at that. Sometimes this can be kind of a misleading error in the sense that, for example, if your robot's text file is unreachable once a day, then that'll affect a lot of potential crawls that we have on your website. It's actually just one request that's unavailable, but because it's unavailable, we'll kind of delay crawling of anything else until we can fetch it again. So sometimes this kind of situation comes up with individual requests that we can't get to. Sometimes it's a legitimate problem that we just can't crawl everything that we try to request from your server. And somewhere along the line in the firewall, maybe in the hosting environment somewhere, those requests might be getting blocked. But I can take a quick look if you post your URL in a forum thread.
Of those Google bot, is it okay to limit the speed of the Google bot indexing to slow it down? I've seen some people do that. I didn't think it was the best idea.
When we run across a lot of errors, we'll generally slow our crawling down because we think, well, when we run across a lot of connection errors or server errors, we'll generally slow the crawling down because we think maybe Googlebot is the reason why these errors are showing up. Maybe we're doing too much. So that's something that will happen. With normal crawl errors like 404s, 410s, we don't slow down because that's a normal server response. But if we can't get a normal response, then we'll slow down a little bit. But if this is like a stable 5% that we see errors with the connection problems like this, then generally that's not going to cause any problems for indexing because we can still crawl more than enough with the other requests. But I still like to kind of resolve these kind of issues as a webmaster because that way you know that it doesn't cause any problems. That way you know that there's nothing kind of flaky in your network leading to your server. All right, Rob. I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is there any, do search results vary according to the time of day ever? Rather than, we're a gift company, so we see seasonal fluctuation, which is obvious. But is there any chance the search results could be influenced by time of day as well?
I don't think we do that.
Would that be customer behavior?
Yeah, it could be customer behavior. I know we've looked into that like a couple of years ago, at least here, where we're kind of analyzing what people were searching for in various countries to kind of see if we need to tweak things around a little bit and kind of make sure that the right kind of content is visible. Also with regards to like weekend, weekday, maybe it makes sense to show different search results. But as far as I know, we don't do that. So
because we've seen a lot of buying patterns change to the evening, and I didn't know whether that's because everyone's far more mobile. And it used to be, we started 10 years ago, we saw that during the day when people are at work and had access to a computer, they'd buy, and then in the evening they didn't. But obviously that's now completely switched. But
that's interesting. Yeah.
This year in particular, we've seen evening purchases go up a lot versus during the day.
I don't think we do anything with like the search ranking there that we'd say evening will kind of boost this type of site, and during the daytime will boost a different type of site. I think it might be an interesting thing to experiment on, but it's very tricky to try out.
Would you ever do that?
I mean, we run experiments all the time, so I wouldn't say that we'll never do that, but if this causes more confusion and we notice that users are kind of getting lost with the search results because what they search for in the morning when at work doesn't match what they search for in the evening when they want to go buy it, that can be confusing, you know?
Morning plumbers to the morning people, and then the 24-hour plumbers.
I don't know. I could imagine if we had like lots and lots of data, that might make sense, or if we knew that people in evening times were more likely to do informational searches, and we should interpret them a little bit differently. But I think that's probably not the case at the moment. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen in the future, but I don't think that'll happen that soon.
Hey, John, can I just ask one quick final question? In Webmaster Tools, we've been getting some errors on mobile usability, and just wanted to get an idea of how much of a red flag we should look at that at with respect to ranking in general.
You probably see a stronger impact from your users directly. So if users are using your site on their smartphone and they can't get to the content that they want, they're going to bounce and go somewhere else. I think statistic I had from a recent conference was something like 60% of the users, when they run across a site that doesn't work well on their smartphone, they avoid it in the future. So that's something that people use their smartphones a lot for search, and if they can't get to the content, they're going to go somewhere else. So from that point of view, you're probably going to be seeing a stronger effect. You probably also have trouble seeing that in your logs, though, because if people go to your site once and they don't come back on their phone, then you don't see that 50% of your users are using smartphones, for example, because they just go there once and they don't go there a second time. From a search point of view, at the moment we show the little mobile-friendly label in search results. I imagine over time users will kind of get used to that and focus on those sites more when they search on their smartphone. At some point, we're going to look into whether or not it makes sense to rank those sites differently for smartphone users as well. So if your site doesn't work well on a smartphone, maybe we shouldn't be showing it in the search results as visibly for smartphone users. Maybe we should show it normally for desktop, but not as visibly for smartphone users. But that's still a bit off, so we still have a lot of experiments to do and to figure out how we should handle that appropriately. But I think that's going to be a general direction that we're going to be heading for. But in the meantime, you'll probably see a much stronger effect, really, just from the way users are using your site.
Like, I mean, I tried to go to adobe.com, and it's all like just a black site on mobile. Like, I don't understand. How do you guys take a look at that? I mean,
yeah, I imagine something like Adobe will be a bit different because there are people who are specifically going to that company's website on purpose. But if you're looking for something generic and you just want to buy a pair of shoes and you're on your smartphone, you're not on your laptop, then you're not going to bother with like one site that doesn't work well on your smartphone when you know that other people offer the same product in a way that does work on your smartphone. So in cases like that, users are going to go somewhere else where they can get that information or that product.
yeah. All right. Thank you for a wonderful year.
Hey, John.
Thank you so much for everything you've done, John.
Yeah, should we do another one next week? Are you guys around?
No, we're here. SEO is...
Yeah, that would be definitely a good thing to do, another one.
Yep.
Right. All right. Yeah, we have a couple of questions still lined up.
Sorry, I said it seems that all people are same people are always here.
We're always here. We never stop working.
That's why I try to invite some new people from time to time. I think sometimes that works, sometimes not so much, but
John, can I propose to do a funny one? I mean, closer to the New Year. It would be very, very nice to have a funny one.
A funny one, okay.
Yeah, where
Fun
you are
for
answering
everyone.
directly the questions and with data and stuff and real numbers.
Real numbers. Or maybe I'll just say yes or no for all questions. We can do like go through more questions that way instead of having to explain why.
We'll start with Barry.
Okay, I'll set one up for next week. I'm around as well, so we can set that up and see if we can do something a little bit more lighthearted.
Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you all for joining. I wish you all a great Christmas if you're celebrating, and thanks for all the questions. And maybe I'll see you next week or next year.
Thanks, John.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Mhm.